Hello, welcome back to Killer Score, the podcast that covers cult classic films and their soundtracks and composers. And in this one, we got a special one kicked off by Richie. But before we get into it, we would like to remind you all that we have a Patreon. It'll be down in the description. We really would appreciate the support of people like you. Helps keep the show going, helps us focus on bigger endeavors and projects. We also have a Ko-Fi page you can make one-time donations to if you would like. And we also are, going to get some ad revenue eventually once we have ads going. So we really appreciate all the support of people like you, and make sure to subscribe, like, comment, all the jazz.
There is also on the Anchor page, if you listen to this on Spotify, there is also an option in there that if you want, you can also make a one-time donation or a membership through Spotify.
Yeah, and once we get to a certain subscriber count on YouTube, we are going to set up channel memberships too. We'll make cool little emotes and stuff like that you guys can post and chat and stuff.
Yep.
And I think it's a good idea that we eventually do some kind of live stream.
Yeah.
When we get enough followers.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'd be fun.
Oh, yeah. I'd love that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep, Richie here. And since February tends to be a kind of topic-neutral month for us, I decided to do what Daulton did with Black Dynamite not too long ago and throw in a Black History Month episode. The candidates I had for that are both numerous, too popular, and too recent in certain cases, so we may get around to those next February, but until then, I figured I'd throw a bit of a curveball and discuss a interesting little decade for film, for comics, and for the casting of both.
Yeah, and do you have any do we have anything we would like to plug?
Comic dubs on my channel coming soon, along with some audio dramas that I've been working on with certain members of present company.
Same here. Working on some curtain videos. Got some scripts done, working out some stuff. Really trying to get a big Doctor Who video done since the 60th anniversary is going to be this year. And, want to get more people interested in the show. So I actually plan on releasing a guide for helping people get into Doctor Who.
Yep.
And as for me, I am a small business owner at witchandcraftsnj.com. Yes, I got it right this time. I'm starting to finally get it. Yay.
Woohoo!
You can contact me through the contact me link on our website, or you can also send me a message over Facebook or Instagram at witchandcrafts.
She takes commissions.
Yes, I do.
Good ones at that. Seriously. She's awesome. So, kicking this off, I want to take everyone to an interesting time and blow some minds for the younger viewers out there when I tell you that there was a time in cinema history when the idea of a superhero movie was box office poison.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And for...
Specifically after, there was a period, if you made it after the early 80s up until, the Batman era, pre-Batman, you would definitely go bad, and if it was post the Schumacher Batman movies, they tended to flop.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And there is no better evidence for that than the early 90s.
Oh, yeah. That was a really bad period, because, if you weren't a Batman film, you didn't do well. I mean, look at stuff like The Shadow, for example.
The Shadow, The Phantom,
Rocketeer.
Barbed Wire.
Rocketeer.
Tank Girl. Not exactly a superhero movie, but...
Comic movie.
But a comic movie.
And let's not forget that technically the Ninja Turtles sequels would count, too. Because they were based off a comic book property.
Yes.
And Ninja Turtles 4. Woo!
Dear Lord.
Yeah.
There are certain things we don't talk about on this podcast. One of them is Ninja Turtles 4.
Or 3.
Was 3 the time travel one?
3 was the time travel one.
I always mix it up with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4 time travel video game.
Yeah, Turtles in Time.
Yeah.
That said, there is a weird little anomaly of a movie, which marked one of two occasions that was one of the first occasions of a African-American lead in a superhero film. The first of these, unfortunately, was Steel. But we don't talk about Steel.
What about Blank Man?
The other example we have...
The Wayans Brothers superhero movie.
Oh my god.
That's a thing.
I know it's a thing.
Side note, probably would have brought Meteor Man onto the show had I seen it. I've heard decent things, though.
We're definitely not covering The Adventures of Pluto Nash. I've never seen it.
Neither have I, but the look of disdain in Richie's face was glorious.
Have you seen it?
I think I have, but I also think that my brain has protected itself by blocking out that memory so that it didn't shut down with it being compounded by compounding that with every other horrible experience in my life. That said,
has anyone had a weirder film career than Eddie Murphy?
Honestly, no.
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not. But the other
Yeah.
high-profile black superhero movie to come out of the 90s was...
Blade?
2000s, actually.
Oh, whoops, never mind.
No.
Blade
The
was
first
99?
Blade was...
99?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I was going to mention Blade at some point before y'all shot my ramping introduction out of the sky again.
You're
welcome.
Sorry, you have to understand. Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Oh my god, that was actually really good. Before Blade proved that said movies could succeed, however, there was one odd duck little movie that rose from the ashes to become an odd little relic decades after its weird period of decent success. And that is Spawn.
Yeah, and this one's a weird duck for many reasons. Perhaps the biggest one, in my opinion, being it's the only theatrical film release, to my knowledge, of an Image Comics character.
Theatrically, yes. The only other film at all based on an Image Comics character was the animated film adaptation of Fire Breather.
Yeah, because when you think of all of the big Image Comics characters, it's kind of shocking. They keep telling us that there's gonna be a Youngblood movie. I don't believe it. That's been a rumor for years.
Yeah.
And I'm honestly kind of surprised we never got Savage Dragon.
Sad too, because Savage Dragon is actually really well written.
Yeah.
Fair warning though, the writer does not believe in pulling punches. It's heavy.
Meh.
But brief history lesson on Image, Spawn, and this movie before we head into this.
This is the part where Richie and I get to be total comic book nerds again.
And this is where I just sit here awkwardly and pretend to listen.
So basically, 90s were not a good time for the comic book industry.
Not at all.
So the speculator boom was kind of screwing with the comic book industry.
In which all sorts of gimmicky, half-baked comics with catchy covers and little else going for them were brought out in order to capitalize on the collector industry, not realizing that the ones that had come before it were so ubiquitous as collector's items because of their rarity, and that oversaturating the market was the opposite of a good idea.
Yeah, honestly, the real reason older comic books were getting expensive was not because of gimmicks, it was because of scarcity.
And because a lot of the older comics were disposed of so frequently.
Yeah, they were the reason they called them, people referred to them as pulps back in the days, they were made with pulp paper. They were cheap products.
And held together with glue.
Yeah.
And super long story short, Image Comics is a comic publisher birthed from a whole bunch of...
Basically, a lot of the top-level talents that were working for companies like Marvel and DC were getting fed up.
Yeah.
Because they were getting tossed around on projects, taken off of projects, not getting paid enough, so they went, okay, why don't we make our own company?
Which is where Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane ended up
bunch of other creators
jumping ship to.
Yeah, bunch of other talents and creators too. That, like, if we pulled up a list, we would be here forever just listing off all of the people who were, like, big names that worked at Image.
And speaking of Todd McFarlane, that brings us to arguably his most fondly remembered independent creation, Spawn.
Yeah.
The story of a CIA operative / soldier who was betrayed by his boss and comrade and ended up going to hell for his violent life before being recruited as a after which he is recruited by Malbolgia, basically Satan, to be a soldier of hell so he can see his wife again.
Easily the most famous character to come out of Image, I would say.
Probably. It's either that or the aforementioned Savage Dragon, and you kind of have to be a total nerd to know Savage Dragon.
Yeah, and pretty much and a lot of people know Spawn, especially because of the multitude of Spawn video games that have been made. And, of course, his very famous crossover in Soul Calibur 2 on the Xbox.
And recently in Mortal Kombat 11.
Oh, yeah, he was in that.
There was also a really great HBO animated adaptation in the 90s in which he was portrayed by, hands down, the best actor to ever lend him a voice, Keith David.
Yeah, and from this point, and Keith David basically became the de facto voice for Spawn after that.
The only other time he didn't voice Spawn was, weirdly enough, in the Spawn video games. Something I want to point out is the Spawn video that the Angry Video Game Nerd did on Spawn Armageddon, the Devil May Cry clone.
Yeah.
Good game, and Spawn's voice was good in that. But what old James Rolfe had missed, actually, was that he wasn't voiced by Keith David and was being doubled by Kevin Michael Richardson.
Yeah, one of those... Yeah, there's some, like, voice actors who are able to be uncannily good voice doubles in the industry. I would say probably, arguably, one of the best and most famous ones is James Arnold Taylor.
Oh, yeah. His impressions of Captain Jack Sparrow and Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi is just amazing.
Yeah, I've actually had some people who are big Star Wars nerds who, like, mentioned they love the Clone Wars series and they don't know that Ewan McGregor actually didn't do the voice.
You know what else, too? Little bit of side trivia. Corey Burton was frequently a voice double for Count Dooku, Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
And Christopher Lee actually went and watched the Clone Wars and was so impressed with Corey Burton that he didn't even realize that wasn't himself.
Yeah, and I think there was a similar incident with Kingdom Hearts where Corey Burton voice doubled for
Ansem.
Yeah, for Christopher Lee, and he was like, "Wait, that wasn't me."
Yeah, like
I don't remember being in the studio that day.
Christopher Lee was amazing, is the message.
He was.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, Spawn. Amazing. But
she just made me think of, like, those crappy 80s, like, cartoon adaptations of, like, very violent properties.
Like the Toxic Avenger?
Yeah, or, like, Rambo, the Rambo cartoon, or RoboCop. I just pictured, like, a little girl being like, "You saved me, Spawn, I love you."
You saved me, Spawn, I love you.
I'm your worst nightmare, kid. But
okay, I'll think about that later.
That version of Spawn would totally skateboard.
You would?
I
haven't even seen this movie.
I gotta derail one of your episodes someday. Anyway.
We all derail each other's episodes.
We do, but not to this level.
The Moulin Rouge one all over the place.
Yeah, that was an even bigger derailment.
Oh yeah, that was all over the place. In the interest of avoiding that, I gotta talk about the weird levels of success Spawn had before just sort of fading away into relative obscurity. The 90s and early 2000s were a good period for Spawn. There were video games, there was the
comic books,
the TV show, but then
Pogs, I'm sure.
And then it just sort of faded into obscurity, and the comics themselves got really weird, with Earth being destroyed, God, Satan, and Spawn getting trapped in a pocket dimension.
Stuff getting derailed because of lawsuits. There's the famous point of Neil Gaiman actually suing Todd McFarlane in Image because they were using a character that he created for the Spawn comics without getting his permission or crediting him.
And then there's Chapel, and I don't even want to get into that character's mess because he's not even in this movie.
Yeah, and he's more tied into Youngblood.
Yeah. So, this movie, of course, was the product of the time when Spawn was a marketable success. And so, a lot of different studios were vying for the film rights for this. Columbia Pictures was going to make their own Spawn until Todd McFarlane said, "No, you're not giving me enough influence or input in this. Fuck you."
All right, fair enough.
And so it was that he was able to negotiate a deal with New Line Cinema for a fairly faithful adaptation in film with New Line Cinema.
Wasn't New Line... Wait, didn't they do the, New Line Cinema... Didn't they do a bunch of horror movies in the 80s and 90s?
Yes. New Line Cinema is famously known in the industry as the house that Freddy built.
Yep. And that's pretty apropos considering the light horror tones of Spawn and the demonic source of his powers. And this is where things go from relatively reasonable to downright nightmarish on the production end. The good news was they were able to get a decent amount of actors on board with this, including Martin Sheen, who always wanted to be in a comic book movie up to this point, and, most tellingly, our old buddy Michael Jai White.
Yeah, was there a 90s film adaptation of a property that wasn't a mess in some sort of way?
I'm sure we'll get back to it.
I would say we'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah, it was a bad one. You got Godzilla, you got the aforementioned Shadows and Phantom,
and
Steel,
all the other comic book movies that
Girl.
died ignoble deaths, some of which might actually also come up on this podcast, inevitably.
There's a chance.
But Michael Jai White was enthusiastic at first about being in this movie because he liked Al Simmons and he liked the character of Spawn. And he liked the fact that he was going to be a part of a comic book movie that kind of broke records in terms of having an angsty character. Because up until this point, it was fairly light affair. Even the Batman movies were, you know, like Disney compared to Spawn in terms of moodiness. And then the effects had to be put to this movie.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's bad 90s CGI.
Yeah.
Trust me, we're getting to that. But the the story behind the effects work for this movie is so long and nightmarish that it could easily take up its own episode.
Christ.
To keep things really, really brief, most of the effects outside of Hell were done, in fact, by Industrial Light and Magic.
Okay.
And that's down to the director, Mark Dipp.
I'm sorry,
that's his name?
There's an accent on the end of the E, but his name is Mark Dipp because it's funny.
Oh.
Oh, it's DePay.
You know I'm just gonna call him Mark Dipp for this whole thing, right?
Yeah, I know.
So Mark Dipp
It's as unbelievable as when you learn that most of the Spider-Man movies have a producer named Mark Webb.
Anyway, Mark Dipp was actually an effects artist on an Industrial Light and Magic before he was approached to direct Spawn, which he thought would be his big directorial debut star vehicle.
Oh.
He thought to himself, this is where I prove I'm more than just an effects man. I am an artist.
As we know, superhero movies are doing great right now.
But then the effects kept piling onto themselves. You see, the 90s were not ready for CGI in the slightest.
No.
And because they were such a new element of effects at the time, what originally started out as a $20 million budget ballooned and ballooned. 20 million became 40 million. 40 million became 45 million. And then the final film was released. And that was a mess in and of itself. Unlike the mess that Daulton is making of his phone by accident.
Yeah, I wanted to pull up a quick reference. You keep going, but I'm going to compare it to other superhero budgets at the time.
So, the release of this movie was bizarre. It got decent reviews for its art direction, acting, and admittedly pretty awesome practical effects, which I hope those would be good considering it took Michael Jai White and John Leguizamo, who played the clown / the Violator, 4 to 6 hours to get into their costumes.
Oof. Yeah, and for context, when did this one release? What year?
The year was 1997.
Okay, for reference, 1991, The Rocketeer, which, by the way, for those of you who haven't seen it, very extensive, fancy outfits, sets. It's a period piece of 1938. Everything's done practically. That has an estimated budget of 35 to 40 million.
Yeah. And while the effects were praised as groundbreaking at the time, and everyone was praising this movie primarily because everyone had Spawn fever at the time, reviews retrospectively were not kind to it.
Yeah.
People hated it, and probably the most positive review on record was one from Roger Ebert, arguably one of the most important film critics of our time.
One of the most confusing film critics of all time, I would say, too.
One of them.
I love Roger Ebert, but, like, sometimes seeing his reviews of what he was like, yeah, it's good, and what he says is bad, you're just like, what?
Wait, what?
Yeah, he has weird tastes. Case in point, he gave this movie a 4 stars out of 4 rating.
What?
Oh, no, 3 out of 4.
Still, what?
And I do believe it says everything that the biggest compliment he had was this movie's visual effects. Because, here's the thing, the practical effects are decent in this movie.
They're okay.
Like, I don't think anyone's gonna disagree with the fact that Spawn's suit looks nice and wet puppety and intricate, and that's what you want out of Spawn.
Yeah, I would just argue that a lot of the 90s superhero films, even before this, kind of look better, in my opinion. I would argue even, like, the Schumacher Batman movies look better, because, like, they have really good lighting and set design.
If only the writing lived up to it, you know?
Yeah, like, I love the nightmarish neon colors of Batman Forever.
Just doesn't fit with the whole Adam West aesthetic.
Yeah, that's fair.
But, this movie, you know, it did well at first, but then it only made maybe twice its budget worldwide, and even though its relative success with merchandise, because Todd McFarlane was always good at marketing that sort of stuff, despite all that, it was still considered a failure, and the critics were all too happy to feed into that. I am of the opinion that this movie it's what I call a Lucky Charms movie.
Yeah.
An average movie that is super flawed but has things that I can legitimately point to as things that could have made it a great movie. For instance, we have a returning composer that we had previously covered last episode.
Who's that?
Our old buddy Graham Revel.
Ah, yeah, good old Graham.
This one is a bit different in that he's clearly flexing his Danny Elfman muscles here. Fitting, considering Tim Burton was once approached to direct this movie.
I feel like that would be a completely different movie.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, a bit subtler than the one we got.
But this is still 90s Tim Burton.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they probably couldn't have afforded him. He was a hot ticket.
He was, yeah.
Yeah. But Graham Revel's score is really moody and atmospheric, and they got a lot of good licensed metal music at the time. Yes, it is that era of metal, but you gotta remember, this is a 90s movie.
Yeah.
Sometimes music doesn't necessarily have to be good to fit the mood of a movie. And speaking of the 90s, I'll warn you that being a product of its time is very much the biggest fault of this movie. Spawn has weird comedy elements. A lot of weird instances of sex jokes and fart humor that do not gel with the horrific circumstances of the story. Like, it kind of reeks of PG-13 adaptation of an R-rated source in a lot of ways. Because there was some humor in the Spawn comics, but it was really dark, acerbic humor.
Yeah.
And the Violator, in particular, is a character who has like, really macabre, sadistic sense of humor, like if the Joker had even fewer standards.
Yeah, this was the era of when like comic characters had names like the Violator and Bloodsport.
Bloodsport was 80s.
Oh yeah, but like Cabal and like all sorts of like crazy edgy names like that.
All that edgelord shit.
Yeah, Die Hard.
Night Thrasher.
These are real, by the way.
Is there a Harvester? Because I feel like there's
Probably.
a Harvester
There's
somewhere.
probably a Harvester somewhere.
And he's like a villain, of course.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But yeah, even Michael Jai White, who loved Spawn, came out later saying that he did not like how this movie turned out at all.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I'm of the opinion that it's average. It's not a piece of shit, but it's not the success that Ebert and the critics of the time said it was.
And before we get into it, is there a place where people can watch this if they want to watch along?
It is on HBO Max, to my knowledge.
Okay.
And I'm sure if you looked around, it would be on Amazon Prime as well.
Yep, for rental and stuff.
Yeah.
I could have sworn I caught a couple of free links on YouTube as well.
That's weird that when you just started to say something, it kind of blanked out right there. That was really weird.
Huh. Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so weird how, like, your voice just cut out. You should get that looked at.
A fucking grin.
It took you a hot minute.
Erin, are you sure he's not the demon who's trying to influence us towards fighting for hell?
I will not confirm nor deny. I'm not going to go any further.
All right. Tons more trivia to follow after we begin screening, but this intro has gone on long enough, so let's take a dive into hell. And we're back on Killer Score after screening 1997's adaptation of Spawn.
Spawn.
It is very much as flawed as I had alluded to in the intro, and honestly even more flawed than I remember the last couple of times I've seen it. I think the saddest thing for me personally is that the ingredients for a good movie about Spawn are there. You've got Michael Jai White acting his ass off. You've got some decent prosthetic effects on the suits.
You got like a great cast. You got some pretty big names for the effects industry too. Robert Kurtzman worked on this, and for those who don't know, Robert Kurtzman went on to do a bunch of The Walking Dead's effects.
Objectively good prosthetic practical effects for that.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
But what brings this movie down is its inconsistent tone, its reliance on gross-out humor that was par for the course of the 90s, and its refusal to go hog wild with the dark tones of its source material. There's a whole lot of artistic liberties and adaptational liberties taken with the source material that just kind of undoes the whole thing, and we will get into those, but here are my co-hosts with their perspective.
Yeah, and I would just like to make a quick correction. Robert Kurtzman was involved, like his effects company was involved with The Walking Dead. He didn't personally do stuff for The Walking Dead. He did, however, do effects on something Aaron brought up during the screening, which was he worked on the effects for Army of Darkness.
Yeah.
And From Beyond, which, like,
Some
say
of
what you will about that movie, but the effects are amazing.
I kind of like that movie.
Yeah. And, you know, he's done The Wishmaster. I just figured I'd give a shout out to, like, all the some of the crazy stuff he's done. 99's House on Haunted Hill. Bad film as well, but great effects work.
Great effects.
Ghost Ship, also a terrible film.
Movie, but
Great effects. And also, yeah, he's also done non-horror stuff like Bad Boys 2. And probably the thing people know Kurtzman best for, his long collaborative work with Rob Zombie.
Yeah.
Like he, for example, did The Devil's Rejects, and that film has amazing practical effects.
Good score, too.
Yeah, it really nails, like, the grindhouse aesthetic and, like, grimy 70s horror it's going for.
All the gooey effects.
Easily the best of Rob Zombie's films. I know that's
Easily.
not like a hot take, but and rest in peace, Sid Haig. He killed it in that movie.
Yeah.
I just love the scene where he's tormenting that poor child. Don't you like clowns? Aren't we fucking funny?
So, Spawn?
Spawn.
Spawn. It's a movie.
Yeah. Okay. You gave your thoughts for what you think on it now that we've rewatched it, correct?
Yeah, I just said.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah,
miss
you
that
did.
whole thing?
No, I was there for it. I just didn't know if you had anything else to add to that.
I do, but my hosts must also go.
I vaguely remember bits of memories from when I was, like, a few years old of, like, creeping down the stairs, and I think my parents had either rented this or had it on HBO or something, and I just remember seeing some of the scenes towards the end with, like, the fire in the house, and my parents were like, "What are you doing down here? Get back to bed." That's actually, like, a pretty early memory for me now that I think about it, because that was at our first house, so I could have only been, like, a couple of years old at that. Well, actually, yeah, it would have had to be at least 3, because this came out in 97.
97, yep.
So I would have had to be at least 3.
Yeah.
And I remember Monster, like, seeing me, and just, that was my dog I had at the time, and just being like, hmm? And he just kind of, like, when they told me to go back to bed, Monster just, like, went up the stairs with me and kind of, like, escorted me back to bed.
This huge Rottweiler and a small 3-year-old.
He was a good dog. He was a very, very good dog. I miss Monster. He was a great dog. For those who don't know, my dog, when we moved away, we couldn't take him to my dad's house, and Mom wouldn't be able to be anywhere with a pet, so we gave him to, like, a neighbor of ours.
Oh.
good person. They took good care of Monster up until Monster eventually passed away. Nothing complicated, just old age, you know.
Yeah.
But
He was a big boy.
he was a very good boy, most loyal dog ever. Specifically to me, my parents actually could never be too strictly disciplinary around me because Monster would be very scary Rottweiler when that
Oh,
happened.
that's cool.
It was funny.
So,
Yeah.
Spawn.
Aside from that vague childhood memory it tied into, which is a weird film to be tied into your childhood memories, it exists. An attempt was made. I'll give you just at least for our viewers, this is a passing grade in the American education system. I'll give them a D.
Yeah.
D for trying.
Yeah.
A good gold
You
star.
tried.
You did the bare minimum to obtain a passing grade.
You are a movie.
It's like, yup, that's a film you submitted to us.
You're not Steel, so
No.
that's good.
No.
Erin?
So, I want to be nice to this movie, but I didn't like it.
No.
I wanted to be nice, but I'm just like, everything from the bad special effects, I can give it points for acting. The only thing is that it's like the special effects, the costumes, the
pacing is my biggest issue.
the pacing. The other thing I was going to mention is the use of racist and ableist language in the movie.
Yeah, it's all over the place. It is all over the place.
I warned you guys it was a 90s movie.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen 80s movies that handled these kind of things better.
Way better.
Yeah.
Way better.
Because I'm thinking of the most macho, machismo films of like the 80s, and even they didn't make me go, ooh, as much. Like Commando and frickin' Predator didn't make me go, ooh. As much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, this movie's biggest problem is it's trying to be edgy and hip in a really cheap, kind of uncomfortable way.
Yeah, I would say if you were a 90s edgelord, you'd probably look back on this movie and cringe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like
Undoubtedly.
there's much better edgy 90s like comic book films. First Crow movie for one.
Blade
is that's the biggest problem of this movie is it's sandwiched in between stuff that's just a lot better. Because even if you're talking visual effects, this came out the same. When did Jurassic Park come out?
Jurassic Park was 95, I want to say?
I thought it was earlier.
93.
Yeah.
93.
And the effects are 8 billion times better in that film.
Oh, yeah.
And they use CGI in that movie.
And it's... The reason why it works in Jurassic Park and not here is because...
It's used sparingly.
And it's mixed with some of the best animatronic effects ever.
And I was also going to say, we mentioned Army of Darkness when we were watching this, and that movie came out earlier and looked a lot better and had a quarter of the budget.
Yeah, and it had a garbage budget and a bunch of, like, studio issues.
Yeah, because for context, the budget for Army of Darkness was $11 million.
11 million?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, or I even brought up how I thought the CGI effects looked better in Mortal Kombat, which came out 2 years before this and had half the budget that this movie did.
Do you know what Spawn's CG is?
What?
It's Annihilation in terms of CG.
It's Reboot and Beast Morphers level CG.
Especially on Malbolgia.
Yeah.
The...
Malbolgia looks like a rejected Reboot character where they were like, that looks cheesy.
Yeah, like, his mouth doesn't move when Frank Welker is doing his voice.
Yeah, it just kind of hangs agape.
Just hangs there.
His
It
eyelids
looks like he has
clip.
a really bad case of TMJ.
Oh my god, it does.
His eyelids clip.
And it does,
Yeah.
And that whole mouth moving thing, it doesn't even have the excuse that the HBO cartoon had, where they speak through telepathy.
You know how I feel like would have been a good way to handle hell? rotoscoping.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Give it a really ethereal,
Unnerving
effect.
Because when, like, rotoscoping is really good at giving, like, an unnerving effect.
Case in point, a Scanner Darkly.
Yeah, or even look at the orcs and the Bakshi
Lord of the Rings.
and how, like, unnaturally they look because of their movement. They could have done something like that.
And I was also going to mention, if you want another semi-good depiction of hell, there was a 90s Dante's Inferno movie that I think was direct-to-video and looked better.
Ouch.
Damn.
Yeah, because my dad found, like, an old copy of it somewhere at, like, Goodwill or something, and I was like, oh, this is a good version of Dante's Inferno. It's in CG animation. It doesn't look terrible.
Huh.
Yeah, my point is, like, but I'm not gonna the knock to the actual score when it's actually playing. It's effective.
Oh yeah, Graham Revel gives it a really haunting orchestral undertone, and I think it's especially effective in all of the homeless alleyway scenes when you got those panning shots of the rooftops overlooking the alley, and the lightning strikes, and the ominous strings.
Yeah, when you look at those kind of scenes, the biggest problem of this movie becomes apparent, which is
the lighting.
Well, not only that, but it's so clear that they want to be The Crow, but they ended up being The Crow sequels.
Oh my God, yes.
Oh.
That's what it feels
That's
like.
what it is. I cannot wait till we cover The Crow. Either me or Dalton will inevitably bring this up, guys.
Because that was like the first independent comic book movie that was really good.
Rest in peace, Brandon Lee.
Seriously, that movie, I've watched it a few times since then. It has aged very well.
Yeah. So, while we're on the subject of vain attempts at positivity, why don't we talk about the acting a little bit? Because,
Oh, go ahead.
You had something to say, I'm sorry.
The set design is not terrible.
Oh, yeah,
it's actually pretty good.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good set design, especially when you see him going down, like, the 100-mile staircase or something. That everything just kind of goes around. I was actually kind of impressed by that.
Yeah.
And some of the shots that they did when he comes back to Earth 5 years later, what I thought was actually really well done.
Yeah, I like some of the CG is the nail in this movie's coffin, obviously, but something that I praised before and during filming is the art direction. When it gets time to when it sets time aside to put Todd McFarlane's hell aesthetics on screen, it actually does, like, even if, like, the effects are not good, the ideas of them are pretty cool. Like, stuff like the design of Spawn's rubbery suit, or some of the shots that they got with his cape, even though the cape is, once again, undone by the aforementioned masking.
CG, yeah. You know, I was thinking again about the hell scenes, and you know what's my, like, favorite film depiction of, like, a classical hellish look that I think does it way better, that I already mentioned?
What?
Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, of
like
the
when,
Nether Realm.
When Scorpion drags Johnny Cage into, like, the Nether Realm, and it looks like a cool hell set, you know?
Yeah.
There's fire everywhere, all this burnt down buildings and stuff like that, skeletal remains. It looks appropriately hellish.
Drag Me to Hell's little glimpses of hell were cool too, if you've ever seen that movie.
Yeah, of course I have. And
you ever see Drag Me to Hell?
Nope.
Yeah, and you know what? Since we seem to be blanking on depictions of hell, let us know in the comments below, what do you think of this movie's depiction of hell? And what's, like, your favorite representation of hell on film? Because I'm always interested to see representations of it on film and how well they're done.
Or spins on them.
Yeah. Like, there's the classical, as Aaron mentioned, Dante's Inferno, where it varies based on which circle of hell you're in. And the lowest circle is like an icy pit,
Yeah. Because if anyone's familiar with Dante's Inferno, the last circle of hell is ice.
Yeah, it's all ice.
It's all ice, and Satan's trapped there.
Yeah.
So, acting. Michael Jai White said he wasn't happy with the end result, and I don't blame him, but he is kind of the highlight of the cast, honestly. He gives the movie some gravity that was drained from it by the obnoxious comic relief interludes and this whiplashing tone.
You see, the problem with this film is John Leguizamo could have worked if they just limited the amount that John Leguizamo is present, but they gave him top billing, and honestly now I get it because I'm pretty sure he has most of the lines and the script of this film
is to his detriment because they completely undermined what made the Violator such a good villain in the comics and in the HBO adaptation. And let me tell you something, Erin. This is probably one of the worst dumbing downs of an antagonist ever, because in the comics he is a fucking corrupter. He is the Iago to Spawn's Othello.
Okay.
The guy constantly eggs him on, reminds him of how he's alone in the world, intimidates him. Oh, and the Violator fight plays out like a legit horror movie in the HBO series.
Okay.
Because when he's in the monster form, he talks to him telepathically. It's so... Can I gush about that scene for a moment, honestly? Because it's 10 times better. And he has Spawn on the ropes, and there's a moment where the whole telepathic thing happens. He's like, consider this a fair warning. Get with the fucking program. Just...
You know what I feel like your connection with this movie is like, Richie?
What?
So, I'm a fan of the Tokyo Ghoul manga.
Right.
No one wants to talk about the anime because it's garbage.
So
I am the Tokyo Ghoul fan, you are the Spawn fan. In the case of the print material is better than the film.
Hell, again, the HBO animated series is better because it is legitimate.
Yeah.
It was a rated TVMA show. Since it was on HBO, it didn't, cause
it's HBO.
And I feel like this was kind of the nail in the coffin for the mainstream relevancy of Spawn, Image Comics, and kind of Todd McFarlane.
Yeah.
Because nowadays, Todd McFarlane is mostly and more well known for his toy line, I would say.
An admittedly cool toy line because his toy line has some of the most intricate action figures that you will ever see put to plastic.
Yeah, and the McFarlane Toys DC figures are basically the DC toy equivalents to the Marvel Legends figurine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And at some point Todd McFarlane more or less kind of gave off the vibes that he was prioritizing his entrepreneurial stuff over comic stuff.
Yeah,
and I don't blame him.
Yeah, and this film, I feel like the poorness of the adaptation is kind of what killed the chance of other early Image comic characters screen adaptation chances, and especially once Marvel finally got its foothold in the superhero film industry. Because even before the MCU, people forget that those Raimi movies were not only really successful and gangbusters successful, but so were those X-Men movies.
Oh yeah, the Bryan Singer X-Men movies.
Yeah.
And it sucks because Image does have some good IPs to its name.
It does.
For context, Aaron, how familiar are you with Fire Breather?
Not at all.
It's literally about a half-human, half-dragon kid whose mom may or may not have fucked an actual kaiju.
Okay, then. Is there an image anywhere that Dalton can bring up on his phone right now?
Of Fire Breather?
Yeah.
Sure, but like, and it's funny because Image did later gain some relevancy again because they became more well known actually for more alternative offerings to comic books that weren't superhero comics, which is where they got like their second resurgence. I mean, they were the original publisher for The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
They published Saga. Like, they publish a lot of more alternative comics that aren't strictly superhero stuff now, which is where their success lies.
Yeah, because even I've heard of, like, Saga, for example, because, like, you walk into any comic book store or even, the graphic novel section of Barnes & Noble, you're going to see Saga on the shelf somewhere.
Beautiful art, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
And, funny enough, you want to turn it back to superheroes, they have one of the most successful superhero television show adaptations out there right now because they have the adaptation of Invincible.
Yep. Great. Probably one of the better dark subversions of
Coming of age
superhero stories, and one of the best evil Superman characters in Omni-Man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Shout out, by the way, to J.K. Simmons as Omni-Man. Perfect casting.
Yeah, not to be confused with Omega Man, an alternate evil universe version of Superman.
We're nerds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for context, Erin, here is a picture of Duncan, a.k.a. the Fire Breather.
Okay, then.
Oh, wait, no. I'm thinking of Ultraman.
Ultraman.
Not to be confused with Ultraman.
The Tokusatsu Ultraman. But, okay, so...
Earth 3, that's the one.
Back to Spawn. Michael Jai White does good. Martin Sheen is probably the best actor you could get for Jason Wynn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've already covered how John Leguizamo is...
He's trying.
He's hamming it up.
He's trying so hard. He knows he has to, like, keep performing and keep being energetic, and you just feel bad for the guy.
Yeah, because especially when you mentioned he was in, it took him 8 hours to get in that suit.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I messed up in the intro. Did I say 4 hours? I meant 8 in the case of John Leguizamo's clown fat suit.
Yeah, it's a nightmare, and not only that, but this movie, ironically, has a problem that is now a problem with the more modern Marvel films, which is, hey, we made this cool superhero costume. Oh, they're barely going to wear the helmets, and every time they stop to speak, the helmet's going to retract so they can deliver their lines, and then it's going to go back on again. And I hate that trend so much in modern Marvel movies, especially when they have Spider-Man do it all the time, when Spider-Man has a goddamn secret identity.
That's the problem we covered before in the Power Rangers movie. Most hack directors will say, but you can't see them emote. But the whole point is that a good enough actor can and will be able to sell emotions behind a mask. Hell, even the Spider-Man example you brought up shouldn't have to retract his mask because the eyes move like they do in the comic.
And another thing I was going to mention in regards to Marvel is that you don't have to, they got away around doing that with Iron Man in the movies where they're showing the inside of his helmet while he's talking.
And then they just stopped doing it.
And then they just stopped doing it, which is so fucking stupid.
Yeah, it's like you found a perfect way.
He's not there anymore, but at the same time, it's like you found a way to get around it, so keep using that way to get around it.
And then they just stopped doing it. It was so frustrating. And notice more and more now, they keep using the characters that don't have masks.
Yeah. Like,
and have less comic booky aesthetics.
I don't want to bring up Shang-Chi in that case because that movie was actually pretty good. Honestly, yeah, if you like kung fu movies, watch that. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's just so disappointing that, like, Marvel had this problem when they came back into relevancy in the early 2000s where they were like, Comic book movies. That's stupid. Comic books. Oh, what? You guys go out in public in these? Would you prefer yellow spandex?
Oh, that first X-Men movie line.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And nowadays, they're doing it again.
Despite the fact that faithfulness has been the reason why fans have come back to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your name's Dr. Octopus? Dude, you call yourself Spider-Man. Like, they keep doing all these nod and wink stuff, and it's not cute, it's not funny, it's obnoxious.
It's the Whedonization of nerd culture.
It shows
essentially.
a lack of confidence is what it does.
Yeah, overcompensating.
Yeah.
But again, Spawn, it's so frustrating because there's legitimately good cinematography and music and performances here and there, and even Erin, of course, was all about the scenes where the dog with the questionable name comes back and recognizes Simmons, even though he's basically a revenant.
Yeah, I was like, oh, the dog recognizes him. He's a good boy. And the dog was like the main thing keeping me going in this movie, to be honest.
He was a good little doggy.
He's a good little boy, even though he has a terrible name.
And I still gripe with the fact that it's 5 years later and the dog has not aged, despite the fact that it is a dog.
Yeah, that dog would at least be like 8 years old.
Yeah, and
old.
He would have like white tufts at the end of his hair.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever seen like golden retrievers when they get
older dog?
Yeah, they go gray.
And cute.
They're still cute, no matter what age a golden retriever is. I mean, a dog is still cute no matter how old it is.
Yeah, it's like, and not only that, but like no one has barely aged in the 5 years since then.
They couldn't have.
The only thing that changed is that Wanda got a haircut.
Yeah.
Wanda got a haircut, and something that really pissed me off too is Terry's characterization and his performance in this movie, because Terry was. They make a conflict out of the fact that Terry, who is Al Simmons' best friend, marries Wanda. And that's a thing in the comics, but it's played out completely differently in that Spawn never feels any hostility towards Terry, and he regrets not being able to give Wanda a child. And yeah, that's that's complicated and loaded and kind of heavy. But it's not the, oh, you married my wife thing.
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't be that petty.
Nah.
Al and Terry were bros. And also...
The Walking Dead handled it better.
Way better. And once again, for all the steps forward there is in getting a black superhero up there, there are parts of this movie that...
Step backwards.
Yeah, like, they gave John Leguizamo top billing, even though Michael Jai White is the star.
Lead,
and this is probably the most baffling and infuriating part. They casted D.B. Sweeney as Terry, or as Erin.
The character's black in the comics.
Yeah, the character's black in the comics, and I can just imagine a better version of this movie where, say...
you said Denzel Washington.
Denzel Washington or Omar Epps were cast as Terry.
A lot of better black actors. A lot of great black actors could have performed it.
Hell, get Lawrence Fishburne for Terry.
Yeah, and the entire time Dalton and I couldn't really take the movie seriously because
he looks like Tom.
He
Green.
looks like Tom Green in this movie.
Please, somebody edit photos of this movie or deep fake Tom Green onto the character, because I would love to see that.
Simmons, would you like some sausage?
Yeah.
Simmons, would you like some sausages?
Oh, shit.
Like when he's getting all upset at his incompetence. I'm a failure. I should just kill myself.
Look how I'm a farmer.
All the hot takes you have, Dalton, and your affection for Freddy Got Fingered is still the most baffling to me.
Okay, but you have to understand, it's so clear when you examine the components of the film, because Tom Green, everyone says that he's just some idiot who got really successful. He's a very smart man.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is no longer my show.
And when you look at the components of Tom Green, you look at everything he inspired and stuff, it's pretty clear he's actually inspired by Dadaism. Like, his stuff is deliberately upsetting and confusing and everything that Dadaism is supposed to be, which is a deconstruction of logic.
1997 Spawn.
Look, I'm serious. He was people don't realize he was the first, celebrity to actually start, making podcasting a successful thing.
Huh.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be here if it weren't for Tom Green.
Yeah. Tom Green started his podcast in 2002.
Thank you for our existence, Tom Green.
Yeah. And, look, you like to shit on him all the time, but, Richie, did you ever marry Drew Barrymore?
Oh my god, this man is more powerful than I thought.
Yeah. And
Drew Barrymore is awesome, by the way.
Eric Andre owes his existence to Tom Green. The Eric Andre Show is the Tom Green Show.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe it's just my, maybe I just got, different tastes. That's all.
Yeah, they even have the same segments. They have the stupid studio segments. They have the segments where he goes out into public and just, fucks with people. It's the same show.
So, first off, thank you, Tom Green. I apologize for kind of dismissing you as lowbrow in the beginning. Second off, it should surprise absolutely no one when I said that the initial success of this movie completely withered away with time, and the planned sequels were in development hell.
No surprise.
No surprise.
And the closest thing we've heard of anything Spawn film related is a reboot.
Yeah, it's the hot thing for the last couple decades has been film reboots.
Yeah, and at this point, it's just obnoxious.
Yeah.
Yeah. For what it's worth, however, Spawn was a major step in getting more black superhero-centric movies out there. Meteor Man, for how obscure it is, still has a passionate cult following, and from what I can tell, actually has a really strong heart of positivity in its narrative. And then, of course, after that, you had Blade opening up the floodgates for better superhero movies that had a bit more of an edge to them.
Yeah.
And for all of the oversaturation of Marvel, we did eventually get Black Panther.
Yeah, and, stuff like Deadpool shows that, hard R superhero movies can be successful.
And I'm hoping that there is a future for Spawn in that regard, because early Spawn had a dark yet semi-hopeful tone running through it.
Yeah.
It laid a really nice framework for a story about redemption, about overcoming your circumstances and working within your working past your trauma to become a hero to the downtrodden.
Yeah, and so does anyone else have any other thoughts about this?
I don't.
Watch the HBO series, the animated series. It's on that I can guarantee is on HBO Max. And by the way, this movie was on Amazon and only Amazon. Sadly,
yeah, you're gonna have to rent it, or find an old copy. Point is, if you've already seen this or you watched it because of the podcast, let us know in the comments below what you think of it. Do you agree? Do you disagree? You think Graham Revell's score was good? Oh, and before we sign off, would you like to tell us what what the director went on to doing after this?
Oh, right. Though his days as a special effects pioneer were far behind him after Spawn, he still, Mark Dippe, tomato,
yeah.
did have his CG eye talons still intact, and he utilized those, and I swear to you this is real, in the direct-to-video Garfield animated movies.
Okay, then.
Yeah, he actually moved over to, like, children's entertainment after this.
Okay, then.
Sad, but it's nice to see that he's getting some success.
Yeah, and honestly, from what I saw, it seems like he much prefers doing children's entertainment.
Yeah. So yeah, that was Spawn, a time capsule that...
Oh, yeah.
A time capsule that had more interesting source material than it had good film content.
I agree. Like, I feel like I would enjoy the comics a lot better than this.
Or again, the show.
Or the show. I don't want to nitpick, but there were a lot of things about this movie I did not like.
I am 100% with you, and had it not been for its historical significance, I probably wouldn't have brought it onto the show.
Yep, go play some of the good Spawn video games.
Spawn Armageddon is legitimately good.
Play them in the legitimately and Soul Calibur 2's Xbox version.
Get the DLC for Mortal Kombat 11.
Yeah, solid game. Solid.
They
game.
brought back Keith David for that game.
Yeah. So yeah, no. Overall, it is a time capsule. Is the best I can say of this.
Yeah.
They really tried their hardest, but it just did not work out. And
D for trying.
yeah.
Yeah.
We are going to be going into the first theme month of 2023.
Back to an old classic with Musical March.
And Erin will be kicking us off for this.
Yes, and my pick for this is, well, the movie itself, its status as a cult classic is debatable, because it did pretty well when it came out. It was up for some awards and that kind of thing, but I don't really hear people talk about it that much anymore.
Yeah, because, I mean, the studio is more well-known for being one of the pioneers and, the more alternative company alternatives in animation to Disney and more for their 3D animation later down the line.
Yeah, as opposed to the 2D animation, which, if you ask my opinion, is quite a bit better. I know that's a hot take.
You know what? I agree with you, but please continue.
Yeah, it doesn't help that literally no major American film studio is releasing theatrical 2D animation anymore. Not even Disney does it anymore.
Yeah, which is really sad.
Yeah, it's like, why did you buy Pixar, who was clearly going to be the one doing that for you, if you yourself would go on to do it yourself? It's baffling.
There's a history to that, but Erin does have an introduction.
Yeah.
Yes. So this movie that I have picked is a very early DreamWorks film.
Yep.
And if you know what I'm talking about by saying it's an early DreamWorks film, it came out before Shrek, you would know the next episode is The Prince of Egypt. Good night, everybody.
Join us next time.